what I do in private or without any effort is the thing I actually have to offer to the world. But what I notice with people is that a lot of times when something's easy for you, you think everyone else can do it. You think it's not valuable. You think you're not ready to share it because you didn't train for it. You didn't work for it. You didn't struggle for it. There's no structure to it. But primarily what I learned was that who I have been and what I have always been doing since I was a kid has always been useful, has always been unique. And I just needed other people to tell me over time, that thing you said really helped me. When I sit with you, these things start to make sense. Or how did you know that thing? How did you understand the root of that thing that I was experiencing? And for me, a lot of what I notice is the deeper psychological or energetic pattern that is showing up and how it relates to what seems like 5 different disconnected things. And I will say, like, this is actually all one thing manifesting in all these different ways.
This is the Space Whispering Podcast with Rainy. Today's guest is Xenia Viray, and she is a mystic. She does many workshops and one-on-one sessions. So if you want to learn more about the mystical, but grounding it, then she's your girl. If you want art, adventure, she's your girl. I was thinking, how do I introduce her? And to be honest, my conclusion is I have a crush. I just have a crush in this beautiful woman. And I think if I explain anything, it's a disservice. It's like our conversation, it's almost like childlike. Like we bring this like curiosity about life and about how we see life. Which obviously she has her own DNA. I have my own DNA. But it's exciting to listen and to see how other people see the world. And yeah, it's weirdly airy and grounding at the same time. I hope you like it as much as I did. Leave a comment, share the episode, reach out to either of us. Yeah, I think it will be fun. Let me know if you like this episode. Besitos.
Good. How are you? I'm happy to be here.
So how do you pronounce your name?
Xenia.
In Spanish? Because I'm like, okay, in English it would maybe be like this. In Spanish for sure it would be like this. So it would be like Xenia. And the only reason why it's easier for me in Spanish is because it's you just like exactly how it's spelled. You just pronounce it.
Totally.
You know? There's like, what were you gonna say?
I took Spanish when I was in school, and I remember being so mind blown about how much easier and more sense Spanish made than English.
So much. At least the spelling, like read, read, and so many words that are spelled the same, but they're pronounced differently depending on the communication. That was just like too much for my brain. My brain is like, this is what you see. Okay, you spell it and then you pronounce it however.
Yeah. I appreciate learning a system where the rules make sense.
That's it?
Yeah.
So where does your name come from, and how was it growing up with that name? And where did you grow up?
So I was born in the Philippines, but I came to the States when I was 2 years old, and I grew up in a part of Pennsylvania that was outside Philadelphia that I call the Mall. And I call it the Mall because I grew up in the 90s when hangout culture was mall culture, and we were so close to some of the big malls that people would travel to go to the malls that we would go to on the weekends. It was such a big central part of the culture in the town. But my name is a Greek name, and my parents found my name in a baby book. They wanted to name me something that starts with an X because I am the 10th grandchild on both sides of my family. And so they wanted Roman numeral X, which stands for 10. And I was actually supposed to be born a little boy, and they had a different name for me picked out. And interestingly, I've had psychics tell me that when I was incarnating, I was at first going to come in as a male and change my mind last minute. And that's also how my parents experienced it. So they ended up having to change the chosen name of Xerxes to Xenia. And the word Xenia means kindness to strangers because they might be divine. It also means ritualized friendship. And growing up in Pennsylvania, it was a kind of tricky name because most people had really normative, typical American names in my school. But I still really enjoyed it and felt at home having sort of a different name compared to other people.
I love the meaning. I love the meaning because it's like almost like you were born to be present, born to connect.
Yeah, totally. I feel like I love the idea of making people feel welcome or thinking about how in situations like, when you're in a cab or you're at the grocery store, every person that helps you or walks by you has like this whole life, that if you would learn about it, it would probably connect to you in some way, or you'd probably relate somehow, some way. And walking through life with that attitude makes it a lot more fun, but also in some ways more difficult. But I definitely feel, at home in my name.
Yeah, it makes it difficult because, well, at least the way I see it, is that people don't have the same, they don't show up the same.
Mm.
So if you want to show up present, sometimes it's harder for someone else to show up present, even if it's in the supermarket or walking your dog or whatever.
Yeah, totally. And it's also a lot of information to walk around with in your day. Like if you wonder really how every single person is that you walk by, and think about, I wonder what kind of day they're having. It sort of makes it easy for you to forget where you're going, what you're meant to do, to sort of make a plan around yourself and your own goals. So being so curious about other people does sometimes pull me away from my own experience or my own goals, but I can always find my way back. Just sometimes things take a little longer for me. I take a lot of detours.
I love detours. I love it. And in a way, that feeling of being lost is not like a big feeling for me. As long as I feel like, oh yeah, I'll find it. As long as that, I'll find my way back to where
Mm.
I'm supposed to go. I don't mind because then there's curiosity and also like adventure. Even
Mm.
if I just took the wrong turn a block away, walking or in a car or taking one more stop or in the train.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm such a homebody. Like, I love to be at home. I work from home. So, whenever I go out in the world and pass by all these things I normally don't see, I'm just amazed how many experiences are available to us. How many options we have, especially because I live in New York. I was walking to a place today to go see a fitness Pilates instructor who's going to help me sort of orient my spine and walk more correctly because I've been having shoulder pain, and just past like 10 universes of things that I didn't know existed. And I know what you mean. Like those moments where you step into unexpected things it's just so exciting, because you would not know that thing was there unless you sort of made your wrong turn.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, for me, if I find a coffee shop I love where I work at, I'm always going to go to that one. Or sometimes I have like two or three, or one day I wake up and I'm like, I'm going to go somewhere else just to explore. But usually I'm like, yes, explore. But at the same time, I'm like, this is my usual food that I take or my usual drink. So I have moments that I just want the usual,
Yeah,
the
absolutely. You're
familiar.
reminding me of something I heard. Esther Perel, who's this
I love her.
relationship psychologist, let's say, because I don't know exactly if that's the right term or profession, but a relationship expert. I heard her saying how if you are in a relationship, the way you develop romance and excitement is by trying new things. And the way you develop safety and comfort is by doing the things that make you feel relaxed and that feel familiar, and doing those together, it builds like a safety and a trust. And I was thinking about how that's so true for our relationship with ourselves. And also, people are different. Like, some people need a lot of adventure, and it feels actually challenging for them to stay in comfort or safety. And some people are so used to or like to go towards comfort and safety that they need a little bit more effort to push towards adventure. And I feel like I'm definitely more a creature of habit. But I also feel like making one thing better than the other isn't always useful because we're all different. And I've been thinking a lot about how to let myself have both of those experiences, like the familiar and the new, in my own relationship with myself and also with my partner. And it just makes it's just like such a simple framework for thinking about things, like, okay, am I needing more safety? I should maybe sink into my routine or go to my go-tos. Or am I needing like more sparkle and more interest and curiosity and fascination? Maybe it's time to do something a little bit different. And yeah, I've just been thinking about that a lot.
It's interesting because it makes sense that sometimes I want to go back. Maybe this will help you. Sometimes I want to go back to the same coffee shop because depending on what I'm doing. So if I'm going to create something new or I'm going to work a lot, then I want the comfort of a familiar place, familiar food, something I know that's going to be good for me. And then I have room to create something new or something difficult that I have to read or understand and learn. But then when I'm in this adventure where I know what I have to do for work or I'm meeting someone, then I want that adventure. Then I want to like get lost or, try to find my way, or curiosity awakens and I'm like, oh, look at that place. Let me add it to my list to visit in the future. And so because you are a homebody and comfort and you want to bring a little bit of sparkle sometimes, and it seems that you already live in silence, so you have pockets of silence. I can even see it in your space. Then like creating intentional moments of okay, now I feel safe enough that I can go out and create some sparkles in me. And it can be so simple, like I usually turn right, let me turn left today.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to do that in New York because it's like, it's a grid usually.
Yeah.
And, you can always go back. Now, if you feel unsafe, then go back to your route. Even that, just one block, you don't know, maybe you'll find a flower that you're surprised that it's actually there blooming this time of year. You'll see a new tree, you'll see something that will like stimulate you.
100%. I totally experience that in this neighborhood all the time because there's a one direction I always usually go in. I rarely go in the other direction. Whenever I do, I'm sort of shocked by how much exists right there and how close it is and how rarely I see it. And it does feel like a different universe on certain blocks. Like there's one block my partner and I always joke the way the trees are. And there's always like some kind of like very old fashioned car or sort of old movie feeling thing happening on that block, like it's in another time. And I love that New York is like that. Like a block is like a whole universe.
Yeah, and I'm wondering then how you can, also add a little bit more sparkle. But I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there before this ends. But I wanted to ask you about like your job. Like what do you do? You said you work from home, and yeah, and then what do you do today and how you got?
So I do something called imagination healing. And the other word I have for what I do is frequency art. I am trained in a whole bunch of modalities that are related to our spiritual archetypes, for example, human design, astrology, I read tarot. And what I'm really interested in is the space between systems and total intuition, free fall creativity, and how these things work together and how they bounce off of each other and what they do to support each other. And especially in our current culture, I really feel like there's a lot of opposition and division between logically oriented people and intuitive people. And even the way we talk about it is as if we have to choose one or the other, as if they don't connect or relate. And so a lot of my work takes the tools of systems thinking or symbolic thinking and uses them for creativity, or asks people to experience them in a unique and authentic way, so that rather than us saying, well, I'm an Aries, so therefore I have to do this, we're using it to support our nature instead of to contain and constrict our nature. So that's a lot of what my work loosely does. A lot of it is in the form of workshops or courses and sometimes one-on-one work, but it's all sort of transformational experiences to get people to think about things a little bit differently, to show them more options and potentials than what they normally can see. And today I had a session with one of my beloved clients, and what I am so passionate about is helping people bring out like the unique gifts and codes that I can see that are already in their nature. So I help people observe their creativity and sort of map a blueprint of how they naturally like to work, so that they can be validated in their gifts, even if they don't fit inside a box, or even if what they're doing isn't easily filed or labeled in some existing way. And the other thing I did is I went to go see a movement specialist who was recommended to me over many years by many different friends. And she was helping me understand how to walk in a way that better supports my body, just like learning from the ground up, like a baby would, about this is how you walk. And it was so fascinating because we were thinking a lot about how the way our bodies move and the way we're energetically oriented connect. What she taught me was that when I walk, I tend to like not completely finish the step before starting the next step. And in life, I'm very much like that. Like Aries, Gemini moon, like I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done that. Moving on. Like I kind of like jump the gun onto the future before, and I'm also an Aquarius rising. And so it was interesting how my body was mimicking sort of the way I am and my energy is. And I got there on the subway, and it was very rainy here in New York, and I got to pass, I went by BAM, so it was really cool to pass by some Brooklyn landmarks and just be in like a totally different environment after riding on 2 trains for half an hour.
Yeah. So almost what you're saying is like air. So you're like walking on air instead of like grounding yourself and like, I'm in this earth, but you're more like, in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Aquarius, my son.
Mm.
So I'm learning a lot about that. I always growing up, I always thought it was water, by the way. Always.
Yeah, but it is interesting with Aquarius because they're called the water bearer. That's like the symbol of Aquarius, but they're an air sign. So I do understand how you would think that. And sometimes I feel like Aquarius is anti-inflammatory energy. Like it's kind of seeing from above in the most detached way, so it can cool things down, which is like what water does sometimes, like cool water. So anyway, I could understand associating Aquarius with water. I really, in some ways, that makes sense.
Wow, I love that anti-inflammatory. I never thought about it, but the way or I'm this year I've been taking a lot of time to process like my whole like existence in a way, and a lot of it's how I relate to my friends and in my community, and how I can bring that into more people. And so what I realized is like I always had a room or a space where my friends can come to my home and sit, and I'll listen and we'll talk. We'll figure things out.
Mm.
career, personal, relationship, whatever. And you mentioning that, it's like, it makes sense. It makes sense that why that would happen. It's because it brings like calm. So it's like naturally, like I'm not actively trying to bring, a certain calm or, but anti-inflammatory is like something I'm trying to figure out with my body.
Mm.
I think I hold so much emotions, which is like the water, which is the water barrier and like all these things. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I have a lot of inflammation in my body that I can sense too. And what I also want to say about what you shared about your friends is it's so interesting because my astrology teacher had brought up this metaphor about how Capricorn is like standing on a mountain and looking down and being able to see everything, but really being on earth. Like, how far can I climb while staying on the earth? Then Aquarius, which comes after, is from a vantage point that's even higher up. It's not even on the earth and it's looking down because it wants to see everything. I think sometimes Aquarius advice, people can either love it or hate it. The love is when they want to see a different perspective. And then they're like, oh, thank you. I didn't see like that before, because maybe they were looking too close to the ground, or they were looking really close up, zoomed too in. But I noticed that a lot of people, when they come to us, especially our friends, they want to be validated, which is also okay. Like saying what you're doing made sense. Yes, the pattern, your reaction made sense. And I think it's also very interesting to think about the relationship between, like, when is it time to validate someone? Like someone who maybe thinks, who's always doubting their natural organic response. And when is it time to say, okay, yes, it's totally valid to do that. And you've been talking to me about this pattern because you're not happy with it. And so maybe let's look at it from a different perspective. And I feel like Aquarius is really good at seeing it from really high up and also seeing the whole picture. And yeah, I love that you naturally find yourself doing that for your loved ones.
Yeah. And, it's like, it's this thing about, and you're rising. So I know this helps this conversation because it's like what you're working towards, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if I understand rising correctly. And the thing is that for the longest time, I felt like guilty when I would like see someone react of something I said and it affects them, or that I didn't even realize the effect I had on them.
Mm.
And so years later, I would, they would tell me and it would crush me. Like,
Mm.
it would crush me. But I'm coming to this level of like, I read the book Magdalene Manuscript, and
Mm.
it ends like the new earth is no shame, no regrets,
Mm.
no something else. But no shame, no regrets, and one more. And that's the new earth. And that has been like my mantra in a way to remind me of all of this. And
Mm.
also to explain, like, it doesn't come from a place of me wanting to control. I'm just seeing what I see, and it comes out of passion. It
Mm.
doesn't sometimes even come from a place of like knowledge specifically, but more of like, because I see pictures. I see, so it's not really like words. I don't
Mm.
see words. And so when I express certain things, but at the same time, it's like, I can be very like harsh. Like I can be
Mm.
like, oh yeah, no, don't do that. Or yeah, no, like easy peasy. That person shouldn't be in your life, or
Right.
whatever, and
Right.
then I'm like, nah, and then I forget, it's like,
Yeah. It is really interesting though, because I feel like people, even so, whenever I get a reading, any kind of reading, even when I practice read myself, I always record. And the reason is because sometimes in the moment, it doesn't make any sense. Sometimes the next day, it doesn't make any sense. There are things people said to me 4 years ago where I'm like, now I get it. That is true. I'm ready to see that now. That's not a threat to me to notice that anymore. And so I am a big believer that, like, gentleness for the type of people I know is more effective than sort of being super blunt. Or also, I'm aware that there are times when I'm being asked for advice and times somebody just wants me to listen. At the same time, I feel like what you're describing is sort of like when you're just talking and you don't even have any judgment or any emotional charge behind it, but you're just saying it. And so a lot of times the reaction is really much more what that person is feeling inside them, getting sort of projected onto you because they weren't aware they felt that way. And that's so different than being harsh. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But because of it affects me because of the connection we have,
Mm.
or just because I felt like maybe that was me being like in the air, without really considering the effects of my words. Just like seeing and trying to express.
Mm.
So how did you, because I did a little research, like on your, not a lot, but like on your website or your Instagram. I started following you, and you have such a unique way of expressing yourself through graphics, through colors, through sounds, and you combine words as well. And every post that I see from you or your website, it's like, I feel like I can stay in one post or on your website forever on one piece, just to for it to understand it.
Mm.
And so, in a way, it feels a lot of like, it's very profound and, but at the same time, like fun, artistic. You combine many things. Like how was your trajectory to, create what you create today?
Well, thank you for saying that and for taking a look at the work I create. It's really interesting. So Aquarius, so your rising sign isn't necessarily what you're working towards, but it is sort of like your perspective, how you see it and how other people see you. And what I love about Aquarius energy is it's like, I need to be original. I need to be different. Like it's always trying to be different. And so, and I'm also an Aries, so I'm like very impulsive. Like I don't tend to, I'm very thoughtful about how things connect, but particularly on Instagram, I have the thought, I try to find an image that reminds me of the thought, and then I add the things together, and then I add another layer. It's kind of like writing a song. Like, oh, I know the chorus. Now what does this need? Now what does that need? And I just let it out. And it's funny, I have a policy with myself that I don't care about typos. I don't care about sort of graphic design problems because I'm not in the business of being a graphic designer. I'm not in the business of like sharing a publication. I just want what's in here to come out and for people to feel it and let it land and to know it came from like a human being, not something that's like overly cultivated. And I was actually talking to a friend about this because I'm untrained when it comes to graphics. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know what the rules are. I don't know what things are supposed to look like. And sometimes that's a hindrance, right? There are certain things I don't know how to do, but sometimes it helps you because you have to just use your own sensibility and create it the way that makes sense to you. And most of what I post is the artifact of me asking myself a question and hearing the answer or just knowing the answer. So it's like one part of me is like, I don't know. How can I do this? How does this work? This doesn't make sense. And another part of me is like, well, just look at it this way. A lot of the things that I share are also almost the evident the record of me working something out that I was having a hard time with in my own life and all the things I learned or thoughts that followed after I had a difficult experience. And I think that, one of my colleagues and clients named Hallie, who's trained as a therapist and a psychic medium, gave me this super interesting reading last year where they said that the way you share your work helps people digest the energy of what you're sharing through their eyes. And I loved when they said that because I consider myself much more of a writer. I went to school for writing. I worked as a writer, but I never really think of myself as like a visual artist. That's always just been a hobby or, oh, I just do this. I've never taken a single class about this. And so when they said that, it helped me understand how, in some weird way, the images help people. It's almost like creating a soothing energy so that the more deep or potentially confronting ideas that I bring up can land with more grace. And then the music is just fun. It's just fun to layer that. So it's like a pretty organic process, and I really enjoy it.
And so, what is the process for you to? Do you plan your posts weekly, or do you just like receive and like post immediately? What is that creative process?
I cannot plan what I share without creating a lot of like unnecessary struggle. I've tried so many times, and once in a while, like when I'm going away, I'll be like, oh, I scheduled everything. So maybe twice a year, I'll pre-schedule things. But most of the time, I wake up and I have a thought on a walk or in the shower, and I'm like, oh, I'll share that. And then I start looking for images, and then I layer on the caption, and then I read it a few times to see if it makes sense. And then I just push it out into the world, because it feels very, everything I share feels very much like it's in the field, like that it's not just for me. And so, and I'm like, I just found this. It's kind of like finding an object in nature and being like, look at this. That's how I feel when I create that stuff. It's like, why would I wait? Like, I'm not trying to cultivate anything specific. I might as well share it now. And oftentimes I don't remember, like 3 weeks later, if I look at something, I'll be like, oh, wow, I needed to hear that, because I'm not in that receiving place anymore. Now I can actually be the beneficiary of reading this thing I wrote, because it does often feel like I'm just receiving the information and sharing it.
How did you cultivate that trust to
Mm.
trust that, yeah, receiving?
Oh my gosh. You know what? Like, I feel like I very much share, everything I share is pretty much like how I really think and who I really am. And because of that, and this is interesting, you'll see this if some of your audience or you know about human design. There's a part of human design, by the way, is kind of like astrology. You put in your birth details and you get this kind of idea of what kind of energy you have. In my human design chart, I have this one signature that is all about how what I do in private or without any effort is the thing I actually have to offer to the world. But what I notice with people is that a lot of times when something's easy for you, you think everyone else can do it. You think it's not valuable. You think you're not ready to share it because you didn't train for it. You didn't work for it. You didn't struggle for it. There's no structure to it. And for years, I kept studying with people about intuition. I mean, I'm still doing that. I'm still developing a lot of refinement in my practice. But primarily, what I learned was that who I have been and what I have always been doing since I was a kid has always been useful, has always been unique. And I just needed other people to tell me over time, that thing you said really helped me. When I sit with you, these things start to make sense. Or how did you know that thing? How did you understand the root of that thing that I was experiencing? And for me, a lot of what I notice is the deeper psychological or energetic pattern that is showing up, and how it relates to what seems like 5 different disconnected things. And I will say, like, this is actually all one thing manifesting in all these different ways. And because I just know these things, I really had no idea how transformative or useful they could be for other people. None. And so I basically had to start just putting myself out there and experimenting and sharing with sort of no attachment. And over time, you get the feedback. And the more you do it, the less you care about, well, this one did well, that one didn't do well, everyone liked this, no one liked you. Just, it's more for you to practice. And the less attached you get to needing other people to like it, the more you actually get to see what's useful and not useful, and become just kind of like a clear flowing vessel for creativity. And the fun part is, like, I enjoy it. So I get to learn as I'm doing it and create as I'm doing it. And so I don't really feel burdened by it. once in a while I'll get a really spicy thought or a really, sort of controversial feeling idea. Like, I don't think it's meant to be controversial, but I can feel it will land as controversial. And those times, sometimes it takes me a second. And if I really believe it's not about me and it's just something I think is the truth, then I'll share it. But honestly, it was just like muscle, like do it, share it, get used to it until it becomes natural.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're strong enough and you trust yourself and you know yourself, because it's like you have to know yourself to be like, yeah, I'm going to be fine regardless of the feedback, and I'm going to be okay. But I need to share this with the world, and I want to share. I desire it because it's fun for me. You mentioned the word easy. I love that. What is easy for you? What is your easy? I like that. Yeah, right?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. Well, first of all, I do want to say I still do care about the response sometimes. It's just that the ratio has gone way down. And my belief that I help more people than I upset becomes stronger and stronger, because that's always going to be the math of things, right? And easy for me is more like, it's funny too. I don't know why astrology is so on the brain. You can see this in my astrological chart. It's like easy for me is insight. And I feel like that's a strange thing to say, but it's like, I feel like everything in the room is normal. I'm having an experience, and just like a flash of lightning, it's like this thought is going to change your experience, or look at it this way, or have this sentence come through you. And that's going to change the experience you're having. And that's what's easy for me, is just hearing the one profound, simple, perspective shifting sentence. Those things would be in my head whether or not I did this kind of work or not. They would just be there.
Yeah. You just, you just live with it enough that it's easy for you. Yeah, that's good. Because that reminds me of like childhood. What you're saying is just like kids don't really know, so they just are, right?
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I do feel very childlike in my perspective. I get the feedback often that I'm being a little naive, or unrealistic or innocent in my positioning of how I see the world or how I orient towards people. But the thing is, like, when we're kids and nothing is assigned meaning yet, and we're still making meaning of things, and we're not threatened by other people's meaning being different than our meaning and all this kind of stuff, there's this lack of judgment that enables us to relax and be ourselves and show ourselves to other people, and allows them to do that with us, and allows us to create things and bond, and also separate, like move away from each other, come towards each other, without this constant pressure of assessment and correction and perfection. Because if you don't know what something is supposed to be like, then however you create it is fine. Whatever you're going to do is fine. And then you get to sort of interact with the raw material of your soul and develop this weird intimacy and trust, and knowing that if you have that, so does everyone else. And that what gets in the way of it is not, in a weird way, doesn't belong to anyone. It just kind of lives in the field like clutter. And I think that what I love about coming from that place, especially watching kids, is like kids aren't always nice. They do mean things sometimes, but you can really see the innocence behind the behavior. You can see the desire to be loved, or the trying to get attention. And I don't know what age we stop being able to see like the innocence that lives like in the deeper part of us, where we can sort of say that behavior is not okay, but who you are and what you want and what you need and your desire to be loved and seen is still valid. You still get to be a person. You still get to be human. And I feel like with creativity, I see this in so many of my clients. I see it out in the world. There's such a desire to break free of this constant self-assessment and constant judgment. Because like, that's not why we do creative things, is it? Like, that was not the purpose of doing things we love, is to be constantly criticized and judged. So I feel like what my easy is, I do believe everyone has an easy. I don't know what that thing is, but I do believe we all have that thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's the pressures we've put on ourselves, like that judge that exists, that we have created based on our parents, what we saw on TV, our teachers. And so we create like one judge or several, but mainly one that keeps constantly telling us that we're not enough, or that that's too easy, or, you know, always like you can do better. And there's always this thing. And all of that is true or could be true, but in reality, it's not, you know?
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was young, I used to play so much and I used to meet so many people, no matter the gender. I was always friends with everyone and, you know, based on like my likes, or playing kickball, basketball, climbing trees, climbing walls, you know, that type of. Or there was a time that I just like sat and like was pensive, like just thinking and doing nothing, and like stillness. There was a lot of activity and stillness.
Yeah. You know, the other really beautiful thing is how, well, there's two thoughts I have. The first thing is like, all the activities you described remind me of just like being in the moment, climbing trees, like climbing walls, just like, oh, what's this in front of me? How do I move my body around it? What does this feel like? Like, I'm just curious what would happen if I did that. Like, it's such a nice state to be in, because, you know, there's no sort of bills to pay or mouths to feed when you're little like that. And it's so beautiful to just trust the moment, you know, not need to look so far ahead. And then the other thought I have about the judge, and this is the thing I think about a lot, is like, most of the things that my parents instilled in me that ended up creating like worry or anxiety or harm or self-judgment, one, were things they believed in the deepest well of their soul I needed to have or know to be safe. And two, like trying to keep someone safe, that comes from love. So when you end up instilling fear in someone because you love them, it creates this ability to be so compassionate for that judge or that critic, because at the end of the day, that judge or that critic is like, my job is to keep you alive, and everything that's a threat potentially to you staying alive, I'm going to point out to you, whether that's like someone else maybe not liking you, or somebody else saying something about, I'll let you know what they might say about you, so that you can adjust and correct it before someone else sees and notices it. And so you become this like preemptive judge. And it's so interesting. One of my favorite kind of talkers, teachers lately is named P the Fury. And one of the things that they say is like, safety will always be prioritized, but how can you find a way where the part of you you're trying to push down, say it's your inner judge, like, can you ask it what it's trying to do for you, and then give yourself that thing in some other way? So if what your judgment is trying to do is protect you from other people's judgment, what's some other method that could help keep you, you know, prevent the thing you're afraid of, that doesn't require or hurt you as much as you constantly judging yourself? Maybe it's only showing certain work to certain people you feel safe with in the beginning. Maybe it's promising yourself when you share something, you're going to just put it out in the world and turn your phone off for you know, take the app off your phone for a while. Like, what are the other protective mechanisms that judgment, that can do the job that judgment is trying to do, so that you can stay safe without constantly beating yourself up? And I think it's a useful thing to have actually a lot of compassion and curiosity, even about those things in your head that seem so harmful, because usually they are there to try to help you in some way. They're just sort of overdoing it.
For sure. Oh, I love what you said about like how to move based on that activity you want to create.
Mm,
So it's like we were talking about movement and like how you walk and all of this, and for you to bring it to the childhood.
mm,
I mean, that can bring something of sparkle today. How would my childlike mind think about my movement or think about how I walk?
mm,
And so my brother says that everyone has like a walk. And sometimes when he can look at someone from afar and he's like, oh, that's this person. I'm like, and I'm like, of course not. That guy looks too old to be that person. And then it turns out to be that person just based on the walk. So I was curious. That was constantly on my mind recently. And I asked my niece, how do I walk? Because sometimes like I can't see myself walking. So how do I walk? And she's like, you're always gonna start like an adventure. Like you're la, la, la. And I'm like, what? And you're always like, da, 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 da. I'm like, okay. I mean, I like that, but for
yeah.
me, I walk like, bah, bah, bah. Like in my mind, I don't walk the way she's telling me.
Mm,
So it's so nice for her to do that. But I'm thinking about you and like, yeah, maybe, walking like you're in the air, like you're jumping clouds, but then maybe bringing that creativity so it doesn't become like the judge or it
mm.
doesn't become, but it becomes something like exciting for you.
Yeah, it's really funny because actually, when I went to do some of these exercises, I really like this person. I have a lot of resistance to body work and things with my body in person, just because it's not my most easeful instrument for whatever reason. But this person, their name is Cadence. She was like, first of all, let me tell you, there's no such thing as good form. Even as a runner, that doesn't exist. A form is whatever shape you take that helps you do the thing you want to do in the way or level you want to do it. So long as you don't have pain, your form is great. Whether that's running, this, that, whatever. And then she was like, this is not what I think. This is what so many experts, so many anatomy teachers say about the body is like what we're told to hold and be perfect in these shapes that you really don't need that as much as you think you do. And so one of the things she taught me to do, or she had me do, was walk really slowly and adjust my steps just a little bit more. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel this muscle in my foot. I never feel that muscle. It's so interesting. My walk feels totally different. And it did make me feel like a kid because it was like I was experiencing this feeling in my body doing something as simple as walking that I never felt before. And I was like, whoa. And then she was like, try walking backwards and see how that feels and how that could correct something. And she's just watching me walk backwards, back and forth in the studio. And it does make you feel like a kid because you feel like it's a whole new thing. It's this thing you've done hundreds of thousands of times. And yet you're like, wow, I've never felt this feeling before. So yeah, there is something really interesting about having that childlike experience just because you try something a little tiny bit new.
That reminds me, I did a yoga teacher training a while back, but before and after that, I've done like Tai Chi, Qigong, and like a lot of like dance workshops and like things like that. And so I was teaching a class, which is in a yoga studios, a retreat center for like a year. And I created my own like modality. It was very natural. It was like a friend asked me if before this happened, if I can teach her yoga. She's a yoga teacher. And we did yoga together, actually, our training. And, I showed her what I would do, what I do, like you were saying, like the things you do in privacy. That's
Mm,
what I taught her. And, at the end of the class, she was like, more people need to know this. More people need to experience this. And then I got the opportunity to be able to teach that to more people. And it's funny because it's exactly that. It's like bringing this childhood mentality into your work. Yes, use the basics of yoga in some ways, that then completely break all the rules of yoga, the linear positions. But like, what happens if you're doing a cat-cow, but you're like doing it like this instead of, opening and closing the chest? But you start playing. I never saw it as play, by the way. I just saw it as exploration, and also like tuning into the body and seeing each movement based also on the music. So the other thing I added to it was like, the music will inform our movements, right? The class doesn't know, but I know that when the music changes, it's because it's time to change. And so I would shuffle it. So even I am surprised, but I kind of have a clue, right? Apart from what people needed. So we were tune in at the beginning and be like, you're holding space for me, I'm holding space for you. So it's not only for me, for you, but you are holding space for me. So we both feel safe and we can do whatever movement without criticism, right? And without feeling that judge your energies and the judges, the other people observing. You're going to be so concentrated on you and your moment that, you're going to be able to explore. That being said, we can schedule one if you want. We can do yeah, maybe we can do that. I haven't taught in like maybe a year and a half or more, but if you want that, maybe that can help you. And I would love to do that. And, going back to your work, I really want to bring this up and see how you feel about it. But like, I want to understand more of what you do for someone that doesn't know, right? Just a little bit of experience. But I do a one-on-one, or I come to one of your workshops. What are like one of the questions you were asking me about me that would help you connect to me and be able to answer whatever questions I have for you in our session?
Well, I think the one-on-one and workshops are like a very different experience. So I think I will speak to the one-on-ones first. In a one-on-one, I just ask people what has come up for them lately or what inspired them to book the session. That's all I ask. And then maybe I'll ask them their birth information so I can look up their human design chart and their astrology chart. But as they're talking, I can feel or sense what I should look at. Sometimes I use a book for divination. Sometimes I'll pull a few cards. Oftentimes I'll look at a chart. But usually it's like this weird choreography of knowing that I feel the pattern and I have to just grab a clue from one of my divinatory tools, and then they'll tell me more, and then I'll feel the rest of the pattern and I'll go towards another tool. And then at the end, we'll have sort of a picture of what's going on in a more connective way. Oftentimes we end up in a really different place than they think we're going to end up, or we are looking at a totally different thing than the thing that they came in with. But we can see how in this sort of fractal shape, everything is a manifestation of the same pattern, or everything is the manifestation of the same code or structure or belief. And oftentimes what I don't even always say, and a lot of people don't even realize, is that the things I tend to say, kind of like my Instagram posts, you can't always catch them. I always tell everyone to record, because it's almost like if those Instagram posts were written just for you and you were going to get 20 of them in an hour, plus or minus some other things, your energy is going to move. Your energy is going to shift, and you might not realize it at the time, but the transmission will move things around and reorganize your energy as your mind is also reorganizing how you're thinking about things. So that's the one-on-one experience.
I want to say something before you go to the workshop,
Yeah.
because no wonder in your personal life you don't really look for sparkles, or you concentrate more on the comfort, because you bring that into your work, because you even use the word choreography, which is like movement. It's and the words you use, I saw so much movement, I saw a lot of colors, brightness,
And so, sometimes, because I understand you, because sometimes I live a lot in my imaginary mind. And so to bring that into the 3D, into the physical, it's kind of hard. And so if you can, because you already use the music, you already use the graphic and the colors and all of that. So you're very, expressive in even your art or your posts and your website and all of that. And so everything about your work, it's so bright and bold and there. And so coming back to the body, it's like, how to bring, which is something I've been asking myself, how to bring that part into this, into the 3D, which are different frequencies or different energies.
Well, I think that the reason why so many people across all cultures, belief systems, and modalities connect to nature is because nature contains so many more frequencies than we normally talk about. Like, people kind of talk about the earth as if it's this like dense, grounded plane, but different parts of the earth are really different. I went to Iceland 2 years ago. That's like another planet. And from all my friends' tellings, Hawaii is also like another planet, And
Yeah.
I think when you look at the earth is extremely creative. I think that a lot of cosmic energy lives in the earth. If you are on another planet, the earth would be the one in space. We forget we're in space too. We're in the cosmos too. So I think the earth's ability to make art and our interaction with that art, whether that's a flower or a fruit tree or the way light looks on water, I think those frequencies are able to take sort of all those big electrical, ethereal things and all those more dense, 3D, bodily, slower things and harmonize them, which is why I think a simple walk outside is a game-changing kind of thing. And probably my favorite thing to do to get back into my body is just take a walk and be outside. I also love to dance alone because I feel like I'm an abstract being. I don't think that it's like, oh, I think in an abstract way. I think like I actually am an abstract being. Like, I think that's more native to me to think in abstractions and metaphors or patterns than it is to move things into linear narratives. That's my home frequency, or like my native tongue, that abstraction. And everything is abstraction in some way. Like when you look at molecular structures in science, or the way the brain is, or the sort of patterns in nature, abstraction is also in the reality, in the 3D. And there's something about dance that feels like you're letting your body be very abstract, like you're letting it just be like an abstract painting, And I really do enjoy it because I don't think about anything. And sometimes I will cry if certain songs are on and it feels so good, but I'm not thinking anything. So those are the things that kind of help me modulate or calibrate my sort of Uranian electric energy onto Earth a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. There's so much of acceptance
Mm.
from you. You accept yourself as your creative self.
Yeah, it was, I'm 41 and it's been a journey. The acceptance has been something I would say I actively work towards for a very long time. But what you were saying before about like, how do you start trusting yourself and what you create? Like letting people see what I actually think or what I actually feel, or showing that side of me that had to like be hidden in so many jobs. Like, if you're bartending, that's not the side you're going to show people. That's not really helpful or appropriate. um when I let that part out, all of these people started appearing who were like, oh, that's interesting. And I really get it. And there's something about me that's really similar too. And they started feeling like that part of them was at home in my presence because we were the same. We're mirroring each other. Like if I'm okay, they're okay. And I think the acceptance came from me sharing and then other people showing up and saying, I also exist. You're not alone. And that really helped me with the acceptance piece.
When you said home, like I immediately teared up because home for me doesn't really exist right now, like by choice in a way. And so you said home. So you were going to mention about the workshops as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think in my workshops, what I often point to are different perspectives and potentials, usually via two things. One thing is oftentimes when we discuss a topic, we skip a layer of meaning or a layer of questions. So, for example, a lot of times people will talk about a topic like, what's the best way to meditate? Or what's the best indigenous wisdom to apply to this particular situation? Whereas I like to start with, what is truth? How do we know what's true? Is what's true for one person the same as what's true for another person? What can we know for sure? These kind of questions underneath the questions. So you can definitely expect that kind of deeper question asking. And then the second thing is I like to offer people facts, ideas, and things in nature that could help inspire them creatively about a different way to look at things. The number one thing, for example, just to kind of make this more easy to understand, is I often talk about how when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, the caterpillar first has to digest itself. And inside a caterpillar, there are certain cells called imaginal cells or imaginal discs, and they remember and know they will become a butterfly. And at first, those cells are attacked. They are believed to be outsiders by the caterpillar. And then when those cells come together, the caterpillar's cells start actually working with them to transform into the butterfly. And so there's this beautiful metaphor in nature about how the part of us that wants to change, the part of us that's the dreamer, the part of us that believes in the impossible is often attacked. But when in community, it strengthens and then can help pull along those who once resisted them into a change more beautiful than they could have imagined. And I share things like that in nature because they show us like codes of creation, of potential and possibility, and they redirect our attention to how full of total miracles the universe is. We're always having our attention directed to like suffering and polarity, and it is important to be honest and realistic and witness terrible things that happen. It is important to see what's real, but it is also important to have a bigger scope of vision than just tunneling into tragedy, which is sort of what our news cycle tries to get us to do. So the workshops are a place where I zoom you all the way out so that miracles become normal.
Let's do a workshop together.
I love to teach.
Let's create one. Let's talk about it. So you mentioned you have a new offering in January. So what is that offering you're working?
Yeah, this one took me by surprise. I am creating something called Emanate, which is a business school for mystics. I want to help people understand how to create their own intuitive compass, trajectory, and language for how they navigate business using their mystical skills so that they can understand that there are fundamentals we need to learn. There are certain things that are really important to do, but a lot of it is negotiable and a lot of it is creative. And so I've taken so many of the people that helped me, that I went to, who consulted for me and guided me, and I sequenced this amazing experience that takes like 9 years of trial and error and gives it to people in a matter of weeks. So that will happen in late January, and I'm super excited, and yeah, I'm getting ready to share more, but it's very fun to build. Yeah.
I love it. I think that's so important, mainly now that, now that I'm in this world of like business and treating my business as a business instead of a freelancer. I'm like, it's so important, and people are talking about this more. There's more awareness. People are creating, mainly with technology, the ability to create from home or from anywhere. And so there's so much opportunity for people. But then Like a week ago, I had someone in the podcast. It's like, what is your why? You know, like asking that question, and it's called like the golden circle, and your why should be in the middle. And so it's about businesses that sometimes businesses don't know their why or their intention or their purpose. And so, yes, their mission and vision, yes, but like their why they're doing that. And so this sounds like it's like the culmination of that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so necessary, mainly January, which is like a lot of people are like processing what they want to do for the, new year. So
Yeah. Yeah,
anything
totally.
else you want to share with us today?
No, I'm just really grateful to be here. I feel like this coming year is a huge turning point in the collective energy. I think a lot of us are feeling old patterns come up so that they can be released. And I'm just really excited for what's to come. And I'm glad to be in supportive spaces like this, Rainey. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Seriously. I am so grateful for you for opening, the doors to who you are, and the willingness to answer my questions, and also to share your truth and your love with the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Space Whispers. Thank you for spending time with me today. Your host, Rainey, on the Space Whispering podcast. I hope today's episode gave you something to reflect on, inspire you, or energize you to create something beautiful. Help us grow this soulful community and spread the love by subscribing to the podcast, leaving a review, or sharing this episode with your community. If you're feeling called to transform your inner or outer spaces into a true reflection of you, let's connect. Schedule a discovery session with me at rainy.co or Instagram rainy_. What soulful actions will you take today? Keep listening to the whispers of creation and let your soul's magic flow into the world. See you soon. Besitos.